It's not liberty if it comes with a government permission slip. Rights are not gifts from government. They don't come from documents like a constitution or a Bill of Rights. You have rights because you exist. Now, of course, governments, they're not big fans of this view, and they do everything in their power to reject it or suppress it. So on this episode, we're diving in on the foundation, natural rights. But first of all, before getting to that, welcome, and thank you for joining me here on the path to liberty. My name is Michael Boldin with the 10th Amendment Center, and this is the show for Friday, August 8th, 2025. And to start out, way too many people today, and that's really an understatement too, way too many people today refer to their rights by amendment number, like my First Amendment free speech rights or my Second Amendment rights. We even had a commenter recently make the claim that all of their rights are Ninth Amendment rights and that the Ninth Amendment gives them all of their rights, rather than the Ninth Amendment just saying, well, you have a bunch of rights that we haven't listed out, and government needs to keep their dirty little hands out of them. It's very unfortunate, but the founding generation, the old revolutionaries, they would have thought this was absurd and even dangerous. Thomas Paine put it like this: it is a perversion of terms to say that a charter gives rights. Paine understood that claiming that rights came from a document would legally imply that those rights could be limited or restricted as government determines, and that would reduce them from rights to government-granted privileges. Instead, he understood that rights are inherently in all the inhabitants. Of course, we see this very prominently in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these, notice it's not an exhaustive list, among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This wasn't a new principle invented in 1776 and then put in the Declaration of Independence. As Thomas Jefferson, his goal with the Declaration was not to find out new principles or new arguments never before thought of, not merely to say things which had never been said before, but instead to place before mankind the common sense of the subject. So he explains further the goal of the Declaration of Independence. He said it was intended to be an expression of the American mind and to give to that expression the proper tone and spirit called for by the occasion. All its authority, so everything, all the principles and authority behind the Declaration of Independence, he said, they rest then on the harmonizing sentiments of the day, whether expressed in conversations and letters, printed essays, or in the elementary books of public right as Aristotle, Cicero, Locke, Sidney, etc. Natural rights, natural law. This was a constant message, a foundational principle throughout the American Revolution, and one of the most influential. It came from Samuel Adams in 1772. Among the natural rights of the colonists are these. First, a right to life. Secondly, to liberty. Thirdly, to property. But here's the kicker: together with the right to support and defend them in the best manner they can. And Samuel Adams grounded this in the oldest rule there is. He said these are evident branches of, rather than deductions from, the duty of self-preservation, commonly called the first law of nature. And his great friend, James Otis Jr., cut right to the point. Natural rights weren't just for the few. They were for everyone. He said the colonists are by the law of nature free-born, as indeed all men are, white or black. And for writing in the 1760s, Otis was way ahead of his time. He took natural rights to its, logical conclusion. He said, are not women born as free as men? Would it not be infamous to assert that the ladies are all slaves by nature? Even though the founders and old revolutionaries understood, discussed, wrote about, and expanded on these views of natural rights, they didn't invent them. They inherited them. And it went back centuries. Jefferson mentioned Cicero for good reason. Writing around 51 BC, the Roman statesman laid out principles that would echo throughout the ages. He argued that law wasn't just something rulers wrote down. He said it was implanted in nature. And this, man is born for justice, and that law and equity are not a mere establishment of opinion, but an institution of nature. Cicero didn't invent this either. He was building on the ideas of the ancient Greeks, going back a few more centuries. Jefferson specifically named Aristotle as a key influence as well. Aristotle said, that is natural, which has the same validity everywhere, and does not depend on our accepting or rejecting it. Fast forward to the Enlightenment. The next one that we're covering that Jefferson mentioned is a guy named Algernon Sidney, who wrote a book, Discourses Concerning Government. And he was considered a martyr for liberty, a hero to the American revolutionaries, because he had his head cut off, not for publishing this book, but for just writing it. They found it in his home, and then they killed him for it. They actually used the book as one of the witnesses against him. It's a fascinating story, and it was only published some years after his death. But there's a whole section of it, section 31, with this title: The Liberties of Nations are from God and nature, not from kings. And then we have John Locke with his very famous and widely read and cited two treatises written around 1689. He turned the natural rights theory into a rule book. He said the obligations of the law of nature cease not in society, but only in many cases are drawn closer and have by human laws known penalties annexed to them to enforce their observation. Thus, wrote Locke, the law of nature stands as an eternal rule to all men, legislators as well as others. Our natural rights, through the law of nature, we don't get those from government, from legislators, from documents. They establish an eternal rule for them. This is a bedrock principle that the founders would use to secede from the British Empire. But they didn't just leave natural rights to theory, they constitutionalized them. Like here in George Mason's Virginia Declaration of Rights. Much of this will sound familiar, but it was almost a month before the Declaration of Independence. It's June 12th, 1776, that all men are by nature equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights, of which, when they enter into a state of society, they cannot by any compact deprive or divest their posterity, namely, the enjoyment of life and liberty, with the means of acquiring and possessing property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. Again, that was almost a full month before the Declaration of Independence, and other states started to follow Virginia's lead. Months later, I think it was September of 1776, the Pennsylvania Constitution followed that text almost word for word. And the following year, in July of 1777, the Vermont Constitution also followed that text almost word for word. And we know they meant it because the next part really made them the first in the United States to at least partially ban slavery. They continued with this: therefore, no male person born in this country or brought from overseas ought to be holden by law to serve any person as a servant, slave, or apprentice after he arrives to the age of 21 years, nor female, in like manner, after she arrives to the age of 18 years. And this foundation from the revolutionary period. It carried forward to the debates over the ratification and framing of the Constitution. Luther Martin, for example, from the Anti-Federalist side, he was also one of the framers. This is him in the Philadelphia Convention. The first principle of government is founded on the natural right of individuals and in perfect equality. Or you have Theophilus Parsons on the Federalist side, making the same kind of a case. This in the Massachusetts ratifying convention. No power was given to Congress to infringe on any one of the natural rights of the people. Virginia's ratification later that year spelled it out. Some rights are just untouchable. First, they wrote that there are certain natural rights of which men, when they form a social compact, cannot deprive or divest their posterity. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Among which are the enjoyment of life and liberty, with the means of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. So when Virginia ratified the Constitution for the United States in 1788, they were taking the exact same approach that they did when they had their first Declaration of Rights in June of 1776. And when you put it all together, Thomas Jefferson really summed it up best. Here from his summary view in 1774. A free people claim their rights as derived from the laws of nature and not as the gift of their chief magistrate. I can never say it enough. Rights are not gifts from government. It's not a right if you have to get approval from government at any level. But unfortunately, the government-run and government-approved so-called education system, well, they never teach us any of this stuff. And that's a huge part of the reason why we work so hard every single day here at the 10th Amendment Center to reach and teach more and more people about these essential foundational principles from the founders, from the old revolutionaries, and the great thinkers that they read and learned from. And nothing helps us do this work more than the financial faith and support of our members. If you got a couple of bucks of that dirty government fiat that's quickly devaluing day in and day out, please consider throwing it our way over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Our membership program starts out at just $2 a month. We also have annual, 5-year, and lifetime options. Again, it's 10thamendmentcenter.com/members, all spelled out. I'm very grateful for any consideration you can give to joining us today. Thank you so much. But if you don't want to become a member but still want to help us out financially, that's still super awesome by me. Or if you already are a member, thank you so much. And you want to make another contribution, we have people ask from time to time. No pressure at all. Just want to make sure you know where you can do that. It's 10thamendmentcenter.com/donate. Of course, there's a bunch of free and easy peasy things you can do to help us spread the word. One of the number one things, it's primarily by triggering algorithms of the platforms you may watch or listen on. And one of the top ones is watch time percentage on video platforms like YouTube. So if it's a 15-minute video and you watch it for 15 minutes, it's 100%, which is really good. Less than that is less good. 30 minutes would be 200%, and that would be super awesome. So you get the idea. You can also hit the like button, subscribe, notifications, comments in the archive, reviews on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast platform, etc., sharing links and the like. I really appreciate your help in spreading the word. I really appreciate you spending some of your time with me today. I hope this was an interesting episode. I hope it was entertaining, but more important than anything, I hope it made you think, and I hope you learned something. I also hope you have an awesome weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next week here on the Path to Liberty.